Hey friends, Mike Derenthal here. We are going to dig into something that hit the airwaves yesterday, hit the media, and it was the National Association of Realtors annual home buyer report that came out for 2025. And there's something very significant going on here. It's kind of been trending up, but yesterday's news really, I think, kind of was kind of hit kind of significant. And that is that this past year, the median age of a first-time home buyer has now hit 40 years old. Okay, and that's up from, it was 38 just a year ago. So that number continues to creep up. If you go back to 1981, when they first started tracking this data, the median age of a first-time buyer was 29. Okay, 29, now 40. So everybody's been hearing about affordability for years and what's going on in the housing market and whatnot. I'll be honest with you, I've been a little bit dismissive of that because I think some of the changes in the housing market are due to choices and expectation, kind of societal norms that have changed. But I'm having to kind of rethink that and realize we do have an affordability issue going on here, probably more so than what a lot of us have been acknowledging and seeing. So let's talk about it a little bit, because I think there's implications here for all of us. It doesn't matter where you are in your life stage, whether you're 40, 50, or 60, or if you're 20, 29, there's implications here for all of us that I think are really, really worthwhile kind of understanding and taking a look at. So let's dig into this a little bit. So I've put together some charts here that I want to walk through. I'm going to try not to geek out too much here and try to keep it fairly interesting. So bear with me. But the first one here I think is worth looking at, and really probably more interesting for somebody that's in the real estate profession like myself. But if you were in real estate back in 1981, about 45 years ago, almost half of your buyers were first-time buyers. 45% were first-time buyers. Fast forward to 2025, that number is down to 21%. So instead of almost half, now about a fifth of your buyers are first-time buyers in this market. So that's significant. What's going on? Let's talk about it a little bit. The other thing I want you to notice is you'll see in a lot of these charts, trend lines were fairly straight, and then they started changing significantly right around here, 2010. We're going to touch on that real as well. Keep in mind, I'm going to throw some numbers at you here in terms of dollar amounts for income, debt, and for home values. I'm adjusting everything for inflation. So we are looking at real dollars, not nominal. Okay, so that inflation adjustment has already taken place. So we're going to look at median age of first-time buyers. Already talked about that. It was 29 back in 1981. It's now up to 40. Okay, and we're going to see how does that track with home values. Okay, and again, adjusted for inflation, you can see that home values have gone up significantly. Okay, they've gone up about 3 times actually. So the median home value back at 1981 was about a third of what it was now. Okay, so you can see why that would contribute to the change in some of the change in someone buying their first house when they're much younger versus when they're almost 10 plus years later. They wait 10 plus years to buy that first house. And again, implications here for all of us. I don't care where you are in your life stage or your housing situation. Next thing I want to look at real quick is income. So I was curious, how has income really changed over these last 45 years? Okay, this is nominal income, meaning it has not been adjusted for inflation. Okay, you can say, well, you know what? Back in 1981, the median income, somebody's making $28,000, and now they make $98,000. That's basically a growth of type of 3 times growth in nominal, but when you adjust for inflation, it's pretty flat. Okay, it's pretty flat. So if you're making $98,000, if you're making $98,000 in today's dollars in 2025, if you dial the clock back to 1981, you'd still be making about $98,000. And so you can see when you compare that, put that in place with a 3 times growth in the cost of a house, you start to see where some of the issues start to lie. Plus, there's a little more to it, and we're going to come back to this one in a minute. There's income, and then there's debt. Okay, we've seen a drastic change in people's acceptance, whatever you want to call it, or the normalization of living with debt. Okay, back in 1981, if you were 29 years old, you had a debt of about $18,000 is the median. Fast forward, if you're in 2025 and you're a 29-year-old, you have debt of $91,000. Okay. Again, these are adjusted. Okay. These are adjusted for inflation. And you're seeing significant change here. I was kind of curious, well, how's that change between a 29 and a 40-year-old? Not much. You can still see that spread was about the same. So it's not like the 29-year-olds are taking on more debt and the 40-year-olds aren't. Okay, I think that's kind of changed across the board. People live with more debt than they used to. But if you can imagine yourself at 29 versus yourself at 40 you have more assets, typically speaking. You've accumulated more things. A lot of it has to do because you more likely owned a home, but you've got more money to put down for that purchase. Okay, so that debt might not be having the same sort of impact it's having on you if you're 29. The other thing I want to look at was kind of the income. Has the income changed? Sure. If you're back in 1981, the spread, the gap of a typical 29-year-old back 45 years ago versus a 40-year-old, fast forward, that income discrepancy is about the same. Okay, it's about the same. So what we're really seeing here is a few things. Homes have gotten more expensive. People are taking on more debt, and the incomes have stayed flat for the most part when you adjust all those things for inflation. Now, what do we do about it, and what's really going on? Because I said there's implications here for everybody. Okay, some people are saying, and affordability. If somebody 45 years ago was buying a house at 29, and now they're waiting until they're 40. There's a lot of life that happens in those 10 plus years. Okay, and for most people, my demographic, I'm a sprightly middle 50s guy. And I bought my first house, I think I was 29 back in 2000. And back then, you got out of college, you got a job, and kind of the expectation was you start building a family and you get a house. And that was just kind of the norm I grew up in. And you buy that house and you start building equity, typically speaking. Okay, we had the housing crash. We can talk about that later, but you start buying that house and building equity. There's a stat that I saw around this that said if you bought a house when you were 30, by the time you were 40, on average, you had accumulated about $150,000 in equity because of the decision to buy that house at 30. Now, if a lot of those buyers at demographic are no longer buying that house at 30 and they're waiting until 40, they don't have that $150,000 in equity, whether you want to call it forced savings or what. They don't have that equity. They not develop that equity. And so and because of that, we're going to start seeing, it's going to start having implications for older generations, because the older generations have homes to sell. And what's happening here is we are losing a large swath of what was traditionally the buyer segment that bought from the older generation as they were moving up. Okay. The other thing that's going on here, when I first got in the business in 2004, the average time that somebody lived in a house, that first time buyer, they would buy a house and they'd be ready to sell 5 or 6 years later. The numbers were there and support it. They'd buy a house because they were buying it when they were younger. Then they might have some kids. They outgrow it. The one bathroom house doesn't work anymore. Their incomes increase. They buy that next house. So there was more turnover. Okay. More transactions happening. Now, the first time buyer, they buy that house. They're staying there for an average of 11 years. So you're starting to see things, kind of the implications here of what's going on here. People talk about the affordability. Well, we need more affordable housing. Okay. How do you make more affordable housing? Some people would say through policy changes. Okay. Policy changes might be, let's create financing situations that are easier to buy a house with less money down. Well, that's kind of what got us into trouble back in during the housing market crash. So there's going to be some reluctance to go down that road by some people. It's not politically going to be that you're going to get some pushback. There's another group of people out there that say, well, how can we make it more affordable from an open market perspective? Well, there's an issue there because builders and developers typically will have a much higher ROI if they go out there and pursue mid to upper range housing projects. To go out there and say, we're just going to start building more affordable housing, people aren't going to be making as much money behind that. So then do you get the government involved with that? Is that more government sponsored affordable housing? You can start to see where the conflicts arise with the politics behind it. It gets really tricky. And that's why we haven't seen, I think that's part of the problem here. There's a lot of polarization here politically in terms of what's going on, but this is going to affect all of us. We are, at the end of the day, we are all in the same housing market. I don't care what price point you're in. Housing market, you have to have people kind of moving through the process. First time buyers, move up buyers, support the higher end price points and the people that are then getting out of homes as they start to downsize. So we're starting to feel it. The other thing I want to mention, I've thrown a lot of things out here. A lot of these trends, interestingly, started to change around 2010. Share first time buyers. Look at this. There's a little bit of a decrease here around 2010. You start to see the slope of this graph trend down more drastically. I think there's an entire generation came, younger than me, that probably saw their parents' generation go through some real pain right here when we had the housing market crash. Traditionally speaking, you bought a house. It was kind of that you bought a house. There was financial security around it. You built wealth around it. You raised your family there. There's a whole swath of people out there that are now, interestingly, in their late 30s, late 20s, 30s, they may have seen their families devastated by the housing crash. People losing their homes, going to foreclosure, short sales. There was a lot of disruption that happened around here. And I think that might also have something to do with that demographic's reluctance to wholeheartedly throw themselves into the idea that I need to own a home. And so they've put that off. So anyway, it's really interesting. A lot going on here. If you want to do a deeper dive on this, if you think I'm wrong, you think I've missed a point, something to consider, reach out. I love talking about this stuff. I can get nerdy on this all day long and just dig into the numbers. I find it really interesting. But again, there's implications here for all of us. I think it's worth kind of understanding the best we can and knowing what's going on out there at the housing market. Thanks. Bye.